again, in that conversation, Destiny was arguing that if you have reasonable evidence that they supported Trump, that this counts as sedition and that they should be barred from running for office. That was his argument. I want justice to be done by all means. I also want to win, right? I want to win elections. And it hurt us, the amount of people who wanted to just see all the Republicans thrown behind bars for all sorts of silly things. Because Destiny, I don't think he's trolling. I think he absolutely actively just wants revenge, frankly, and it's revenge-based politics.
Because even though I wouldn't go as far as say, let's lock them up just because they support Trump, I do think they're absolute cowards and don't deserve to be in office anymore.
Yeah, I kind of just wanted to revisit the conversation from last time a little bit. Have you changed a little bit in terms of the thing that you default to regarding consequences to MAGA? Have you changed at all regarding that? Pretty much stuck.
I think that my stance remains the same, and just to clarify everyone, my stance is I think if you want to prosecute Trump, Hegseth, Tulsi Gabbard, and other high-ranking officials that you have evidence that have done something wrong, by all means. I think reopening the investigations that were dropped when Trump took office, just because he took office, I think that's perfectly fine. That's a perfectly reasonable ask. That's a reasonable thing to do. But when you start to say, hey, we got to bar 75% of Republicans from ever running for office, because that's accountability, and that's what accountability looks like, I just fundamentally disagree with you. I don't think it's a serious proposal. And if that is my stance, and that remains my stance.
Okay, I mean, when you phrase it like that, that's fair, especially if you have no reasonable evidence. But let's say you do have reasonable evidence. Now we're gonna try to stretch out what the threshold of consequence would be.
Like reasonable evidence for what, though? Like, again, in that conversation, Destiny was arguing that if you have reasonable evidence that they supported Trump, that this counts as sedition and that they should be barred from running for office. That was his argument. I don't think that's a serious argument.
I think that's a ridiculous argument too. I'm gonna believe he's trolling regarding that. I don't know enough to say otherwise, but all right, let's talk about something serious then.
Go ahead.
Because one thing that was mentioned in the prior conversation, there's a few things that you can go towards. The easy one is stuff regarding Jan 6 and the false slate of electors, right? In that sense, if you can find evidence of a type of collaboration effort between certain individuals and some of the people who are considered inciting the insurrection with the Proud Boys, or you find some type of evidence where there's a level of ignoring the very clear intent to overthrow the election from certain congressmen, at that point, you got that evidence there. Would barring them from getting elected again, would that be justifiable in that sense?
Yeah, I think that if that's the conviction and that's the judgment handed down, I think that's a perfectly reasonable thing to do. But that's a different thing than saying anyone who had questions about the election should be barred from ever running for office again, which is just as silly. But if you have evidence that they directly took part in drafting the Eastman memo or whatever, then yeah, absolutely get rid of them. But we weren't talking about that. But to talk to you and to try to separate these conversations, I don't think that there's anything wrong with going after the people who were involved as in either organizing or perpetuating January 6th. But I am against going back after people who at the time supported, if the only evidence you have is they tweeted support for the Jan 6ers, I don't think that's enough.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It really kind of stays at the surface level of the conversation itself, because there is substance regarding the stuff that I said regarding Jan 6 is one thing. I'm sure you agree the meme coin is one of the most corrupt things we've ever seen in politics.
Sure.
Where people can invest in that meme coin and get private meetings with the president of the United States. So the potential intentionality of doing underhanded deals and how that could influence international politics can be extremely dangerous. And The only reason I wanted to bring it back up is because you guys got bent down on that stupid conversation. I'm gonna agree to that. And definitely got bent down towards that. But in a more substantive way to kind of look at it, when you can find very clear things that a president doing in 99% of the time is corrupt. In addition to that, I feel like you could also look at things that are already considered very problematic that MAGA is concerned about, right? They're concerned about the pardon system moving forward. They're concerned about the filibuster moving forward. And these are things, I mean, we see a perfect example of gerrymandering. They try to play that game with Texas. Texas did what they did. California says, okay, bet, and the people want it. Now we're having the whole thing with the federal courts and the Supreme Courts. But now a lot of the MAGA states are going like, you know, I don't want to gerrymander anymore because we're going to lose this battle. So now that there's very clear smoking guns that can be used in the Democrat sense to really change how politics works in benefit of Democrats and in a lot of concern to the Republicans.
Yeah, I'm
We
okay
can
with
throw a bunch of
gerrymandering,
stuff
man.
out there.
I'm okay with gerrymandering if they're going to gerrymander first. Ideally, I would like a federal law banning gerrymandering in general, but absent that, I'm okay with doing a tit for tat in this specific instance. But the problem is that a lot of people will try to stretch that into places where I am very not comfortable with, and I think would be not only unproductive but counterproductive to what I want to see happen. I want justice to be done by all means. I also want to win, right? I want to win elections. And it hurt us, the amount of people who wanted to just see all the Republicans thrown behind bars for all sorts of silly things. Because Destiny, I don't think he's trolling. I think he absolutely actively just wants revenge, frankly. And it's revenge-based politics. And he thinks, well, they're going to do these dirty-ass tactics. We got to do these dirty-ass tactics. And I don't think that's the case when it comes to certain things. Gerrymandering, that's fine. But when we talk about using lawfare like that, I'm not okay with that.
Okay, so I think there's a lot of points of agreement here. So I'm going to make this kind of the final point because you've been up here. You've been talking for a while. Let's stress that a little bit more. So in the instances of the individuals that did support Trump, because even though I wouldn't go as far as say, let's lock them up just because they support Trump, I do think they're absolute cowards and don't deserve to be in office anymore.
I wouldn't vote for them.
sure.
That's true.
But okay, so in this sense, would you expose their weakness to the public
Sure.
if you have the information? So what I mean by that is that I don't know if you saw the interview between David Pacman and the former Republican guy. I don't remember his name exactly, but
Joe
Pacman
Walsh?
had a former Republican. No, not Joe Walsh.
Okay, then I didn't
someone in
see
your
it.
chat might know. So there was a former Republican. He's wrote a book and how he talked about he was like the last Republican or whatever, and he made it very clear that he knew a lot of Republicans that adamantly that very clearly stated to him that they didn't agree with what Trump is doing, but they were too much of a coward to say anything about it. And I mean, we see that very clearly with Mike Johnson as a perfect example. That dude's an absolute coward.
Sure. Would I expose them if I knew for a fact that they had said these things? Would I out them? Probably yes, depending, right? I could understand circumstances where I wouldn't. Like if they're continually giving me information and they're a source, I wouldn't out them in that case because they're continually giving me information. If I outed them, I'd lose them as a source. But all else being equal, and I just had this information, of course I'd release it to the public.
Okay. I mean, at this point, we're pretty much on the same page. Expose the people that made it very clear that they rather win the politics game than care about the country.
Let the voters decide their fate. Because here's the hell of it, okay? If we actually believe in democracy, we have to realize that if a congressional district wants a liar in office, that's their right to vote for a liar. It just is. There are certain crimes, obviously, that we make it so that you can't run for office. Fair. But if the people of congressional district in Tennessee 101 or fuck all, I don't know, right, says, you know what, I know this guy's kind of a coward, but I like the way he votes on X, Y, and Z, so I'm going to, even though he lies, I'm going to vote for him anyway because I like his policies on X, Y, Z. That's their right to do, right? I think it's stupid I think they're dumb, but that's their vote, not mine.
Yeah, ultimately, I think that is fair. Just moving forward, if you have this conversation again, I think the perception was wrong about you. It's very clearly way because it made it seem like you and Connor were going like, you know what, elections are our
Who
only
made it
choice.
seem? Who made it seem? It wasn't. It didn't just happen.
I mean, Destiny, sure.
And
but
DGG in general, this is the game they play. I'm going to use you as an example, not you as an example, right? But I want to use this opportunity to kind of expose this kind of, and it's not just DGG that does this. Almost every online community of a big streamer will do this, and it's just, it's ubiquitous and it's expected, and it's like Sitch and Adam's community does this to me all the time too, right? Hassan, if their community knew me, they would do it to me as well. If you disagree with their streamer daddies, they are going to paint you as the most hyperbolic type of thing that they could possibly do. So me saying, I don't like this proposal that you're making, Destiny, of how you're going to hold these people accountable, they will say, oh, you just don't want them held accountable at all. Even though that's not what I said. And in many places in the conversation, I said, hey, these are the ways that I would be comfortable holding these people accountable. They would pretend like I'm saying something entirely different. That's something that every community does. It's annoying, but it's I don't give that much of a shit, right? So
I think that's fair, but at the same time, because I didn't watch all of it because I was doing something. I was at the gym. I came in later on to see the conversation, and I do think you were in a very defensive stance because Destiny was so proactive in pushing his kind of it. As of right now, seems ridiculous rhetoric. But with that said, you do have to control the narrative sometimes and be a little bit more proactive, because if your only response is that if all we got is the elections, you need to provide me something else. At that point, you can't allow him to have the onus of providing that information if he can't provide anything substantive. At that point, you can just switch it.
Just be clear, the elections are in 90% of the cases, the ballot box is where we hold these people accountable, and that's just been tradition. That's how we do it in America. That is the incentive they have to behave well. If they don't behave well, they get voted out.
Right, but at the same time, there is a want, especially on the left and in the middle, of something that seems to be stronger, which is why there was so much approval of Gavin Newsom doing the gerrymandering thing. So in this sense, even though elections is the end-all be-all, the Democrats do have a lot of things that they can do.
Yeah, I supported the gerrymandering thing though, but I don't think that's not holding anyone accountable. That's just playing politics. Like no one is held accountable by the gerrymandering. Like no one goes to jail, no one's barred from office, right? Like it's just to phrase that as holding them accountable, that the gerrymandering thing is holding them accountable. I don't see it.
I completely disagree because they lost seats in the Democratic state of even though it was majority California is majority blue. The Texas thing, when they did it, there's a reason why the federal judge was like, hey, bro, this is kind of racist. Now it's going to the Supreme Court. Now there's a whole conversation regarding gerrymandering. And then in that sense, all these other Republican states that were talking about gerrymandering too, a lot of them are changing their mind because they realize that this is not something that people like. So in this sense, they're losing potential congressional seats for something they started. And we already know as of right now, the Democrats have a strong chance of controlling the midterms. So at that point, that is directly holding them accountable.
Well, I think that a lot of people
started.
Remember, a lot of the people, Kentucky specifically, and several other states that were red, dropped their plans to gerrymander, not because of Prop 50. They dropped their plans to gerrymander because they saw the margins of wins in Virginia, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and they realized that if they dilute their congressional seats buffer of winning percentage, that they are in danger of losing those seats. So they were worried it would become a dummy mander, where they gerrymander trying to win more seats, and it ends up biting them in the ass when you have a strong blue year. They didn't do it because of Prop 50. Let's be clear on what this happened and why this happened. They saw the ballot box, they saw the election results, and they made their choice based on that, not because of Newsom.
I'm not saying it's because of Newsom, but I'm talking about the full context of what happened, because there is a realization that when Texas did it, they did it without the people's know-how or people's support, or it deemed any kind of very legal process. In comparison to a blue state doing it, they're going to have overwhelming support. So this is really not going to be an issue. So these red states doing it as a response are going to have more of a difficulty, both legally and from their own base, who never said they wanted this in the first place. So that literally what you just said is a recourse of them doing things they should not be doing, because ultimately people don't like gerrymandering anyway. Before all this BS, people never liked gerrymandering. Now it's at the forefront of conversation, and now this could be something that can be put on the table for a Democratic controlled Congress and presidency, where they look at gerrymandering and maybe consider banning it altogether, or at the very least completely changing how it's done moving forward.
Like I said, I'm all for a federal ban on this. But thank you for calling in, Riddell. I do appreciate you, and I'm gonna let you go. Okay.
No problem. You have a good one, buddy.
You too.